This is CNN, the most trusted name in news.
All right, back to our breaking news this hour. President Trump telling Fox News in a brand new interview he respects Russian President Vladimir Putin and acknowledges Putin may be a killer, but also adds that a lot of people are killers. Here's the president in his own words.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you?
But
Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Let's debate it. Robert Jones is with us, the CEO and founder of the Public Religion Research Institute. Betsy Woodruff is a politics reporter for the Daily Beast. Nice to have you both here. All right, we just heard the analysis from our Jim Sciutto and also Jill Doherty in Moscow. Betsy, the question becomes, how are U.S. allies supposed to read this, especially on a day that President Trump just had a call with the president of Ukraine?
That's a very good question for U.S. allies. Of course, we know that many of these foreign governments are really scrambling to figure out how to make sense of the things that Donald Trump says and does. And I thought Jill made a really important point in that last block about the fact that there seems to be significant dissonance between what Trump's team at the UN are doing when it comes to Russian incursions into the Ukraine, but what Trump himself is saying in these interviews. It's just, it's a massive gap even within the Trump administration itself, and that's deeply confusing.
I think that's a really important point because Nikki Haley, the ambassador to the United Nations, in her confirmation hearing and then again in her comments about Russia at the United Nations, took a much more aggressive approach when it comes to how the U.S. should respond and how wary the U.S. should be of Russia. Rex Tillerson just confirmed as Secretary of State along the same lines, as well as General Mattis. Robert, how should our allies read this? The divide that Betsy points out, seemingly between the president and his team.
Well, it's confusing. I think that Donald Trump continues in many ways to be his own enemy here by giving these conflicting statements. And I think most importantly here, it is without really any reason, really lowering the moral bar and really dispensing with American ideals here. I mean, one of the great, things that he talks about, Make America Great Again, he referred to in his inaugural address, a city set on a hill, this kind of biblical illusion. That's always been about moral power and about leading by moral example. And he's just sort of like thrown that under the bus with this latest comment.
Let's also listen to another excerpt that we just got. This is from the big interview that the president did with Bill O'Reilly that will air during the Super Bowl tomorrow. Here is where O'Reilly pushed him on facts.
Is there any validity to the criticism of you that you say things you can't back up factually? And as the president, if you say, for example, that there are 3 million illegal aliens who voted, and then you don't have the data to back it up, some people are going to say that's irresponsible for a president to say that. Is there any validity to that?
Many people have come out and said I'm right. You know that.
I know, but you got to have data to back that up.
Let me just tell you, when you see illegals, people that are not citizens, and they're on the registration rolls, look, Bill, we can be babies, but you take a look at the registration. You have illegals, you have dead people, you have this. It's really a bad situation. It's really bad.
Betsy, to you, I mean, he actually didn't answer O'Reilly's question there.
No, not at all. And the fact is that Trump and his team are really factually challenged. Just earlier this week, I obtained emails from Customs and Border Protection that showed that hundreds of people were immediately directly impacted by the travel ban. That email was sent out at 6:30 a.m. on Monday, several hours later when Sean Spicer, Trump's press secretary, had a media availability, had his daily press briefing. He told reporters that only 109 people were slowed down by the travel ban. And of course, we learned just in the last day or two that in fact, tens of thousands of people had their visas revoked because of the travel ban. Despite that, the entire Trump administration, not just Trump himself, have worked overtime to just distract people from the reality, from the facts of the situation. And as reporters, it's really hard because it means that you can't take any statement at face value from Trump and his team. There's just a massive trust deficit. And that's a huge, interesting challenge for covering this administration.
Robert, you made an interesting point, just sort of a bigger picture point about what this does to the future of the GOP and what you call generational divides. Explain.
Well, you know, I think one of the real questions to ask is what impact is this administration going to have on younger Americans? And we have some, recent data, even from a recent CNN poll, that, shows there may be a real future shock here for the Republican Party. We had 2/3 of millennials saying they disapprove of the job performance of President Trump. We have 2/3 who oppose this travel ban. We have 8 in 10 who oppose the building of a wall, staunchly lined up against the kind of key things that the Trump administration is pushing very, very hard in the early administration. One of the things we know from the political science literature is that each generation actually tends to set its political preferences in their sort of teens and 20s, and that stays with them throughout their life. It's hard to move people off the mark that they set in their early adulthood. And we could be looking at the most anti-Republican generation, and it could be a completely self-inflicted wound by the Republican Party.
What do you expect, Betsy, from Republicans in Congress? Obviously, there have been some who've been more outspoken against the president, like John McCain, like Senator John McCain, like Senator Lindsey Graham. But do you expect, especially given these Putin and Russia comments putting the U.S. on a moral equivalency with Russia in that interview, do you expect more outcry from some Republicans in Congress?
Keep an eye on Paul Ryan. I would expect him to have some sort of comment, either pointedly or obliquely, pushing back against the president because of this. Remember, about a month ago when President Obama rolled out new sanctions against Russia, Paul Ryan really praised him for that. He said he thought it was a good decision that was long overdue. So he's definitely not in the camp of let's all get along with Russia and Putin's a great guy. That's not the way Paul Ryan thinks about the world. There's going to be a lot of focus on him, particularly from rank and file members of the House Republican Conference, to sort of get a sense of what tone the party as a whole is going to take on this issue, especially given the president, almost for all practical purposes, appearing to draw an equivalency between the U.S. and Russia when it comes to human rights issues. So I think Paul Ryan is probably the most important voice here on how the Republican Party as a whole is going to respond.
All right, Robert Jones, Betsy Woodruff, nice to have you both on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up next, more on